Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to a special edition of Full Circle, the podcast.
I am your host, Charles Tyson Jr.
And I'm your host, Martha Madrigal. Our guest today is here to talk about his current solo installation, Heaven on Earth, appearing in LA until the 21st of October. We're going to talk about making fabulous and provocative queer art. I read the quote that I will always enjoy that said, "Your work is like Georgia O'Keeffe, but on poppers." I love that. Christian Rogers, welcome to the Full Circle table.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Of course. Hello.
Wonderful. I love that quote too. So
that was so much fun. Now that came out of a review of your work.
Yeah, it was a review with Hyperallergic, which is nice. I'm glad somebody, anytime anybody cares about my work, I'm excited.
I know that's right.
Yeah, of course. So we met, well, we're meeting today really, but we met through your husband, Nico, which we had a great time. Nico invited us onto a panel at the journalist convention. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
And we got to hang out with him a little bit. And then he told us about your work. And I am fascinated by it.
Yes, you are.
I said, there's a lot of dick, which is always good. Always good.
It's not often that you hear, there's just too much dick.
No, not at all. Not at all. And then I thought, I was looking at the work in the current display because I kind of went through your website and we're going to post all that in the notes to this episode. But I was looking and I'm like, look at all the pretty flowers. And then I zoomed in on the corners and I'm like, all right then. All right then. This is cheeky. So talk to us about this work.
Yeah, they're very dense with wieners. The current body of work is all work I've made within the last year that explores the joy of queer love and sex and being alive and experiencing love and friendship. And it's a body of work that I've been working on probably for about 7+ years now, ever since I finished grad school. And nice. It's exactly what it looks like. It's bodies of flowers that represent bodies. It's men within these Eden-like landscapes where they can cruise and find pleasure and love and friendship and fellowship. And it's kind of everything I wish it's like what my dreams are made of, maybe.
That's fair. Yeah.
And
fair. Giant dream boards.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of the images are very dreamlike in the use of highly saturated color. It gives that psychedelic feel without actually going there, but it's evocative of it. It's very visually striking.
It is.
Yeah. I used to shy away from these like intense palettes, and I think I used to try and make cleaner work, like things that didn't have as much sexual content to them. But over time, I wasn't selling a lot of paintings, and I started to think like, well, if I have to live with this shit, well, I might as well make something I want to look at.
Fair.
So then also I started collaging the naked guys in there again. I used to do that a long time ago, but I had gotten rid of it because a bunch of my straight peers had kind of convinced me to take it out. I started putting it back in because, nobody was buying my paintings, so I had to live with them. And it was just, I kind of went from making things that other people told me to make or convinced me to make, and I just more started making work that felt more authentically myself and what I wanted to live with and see.
Mm-hmm. And that's always going to be the sweet spot when you're making art that you like to see and usually what tends to happen is that's when the audience starts really vibing with your work, when the authenticity is there and you can feel it.
Yeah, totally. Um, uh, we spend anybody who goes through like an art school process. I went to a state school for my undergrad and a state school for grad school, but it's still all art school. Um, you spend so much time valuing and searching out the opinions of your peers and people you respect to help kind of guide you through a process. And sometimes I think we spend too much time trying to be validated by the people around us or seek,
Tell it.
there's a difference between getting advice and then getting direction.
Right.
And I think sometimes I relied on that too much, thinking I was making work for a different audience. And I realized that maybe my audience isn't my classmates or my peers all the time. Like it can be. And I do have, there's lots of wonderful straight people who do like my work. But I realized that I think I was sacrificing a lot of what I wanted in a painting or what I wanted about myself in a painting. That I didn't, that I edited a lot of that stuff out when I was in school, and
Right.
not being in school and not selling artwork for a chunk of time was
Right.
uh, enough to help me recenter my compass. And it's been really amazing the last 6-7 years.
I just always think that the best art really is authentic to the artist, and I think it takes some time to find out what that is and where it lives, and I think it is filtering out a lot of voices, because it's as true in the performing arts, right? That when you get kind of too many cooks in the kitchen, it by definition becomes watered down,
Right.
and you might as well make paintings for the Holiday Inn. Right. And that's not why you got into, that's not why you're an artist. I think this is.
Oh, I was gonna say it's kind of like a house plant when you buy a house plant and like a fig tree or something, and you think, oh, it's gonna go great in this room, and then you see it kind of like it grows in a weird direction, and you're like, wow, that's not what I had hoped for, and then maybe you decide, okay, maybe it needs to live outside, and then you go put it outside, and all of a sudden it turns into a fucking tree, and that's where it needed to be all this time, and
Right.
Right.
anyway, that's kind of how creativity works, I think.
I absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it also, I learned that people don't always know how to give feedback. Like a lot of times, instead of saying what will actually benefit you and make your work the best that it can be coming from you, they tell you what they would do if they were you, which is not helpful.
We owned a bar together for about 5 years, and pre-COVID, and it always annoyed me when folks would sit down and say, I would have named it this, or I would do this, or if I were you. And I'm like, and as soon as you open your bar, I think you should do exactly that.
My favorite is always, all you have to do is.
Right. Things would be great if, no.
If you would shut the fuck
No,
up.
what? Yeah, no. I'm the one that's living here 70 hours. No. So, yeah, I think that's hard. I think that's part of the maturation process, maybe.
Yeah. Luckily I don't get too, most of the time people are kind of it's funny because it's so hard to find art that shocks anybody these days. But luckily now, especially now that there's so many wieners in it now, there's not, outside of commercial advice from gallerists who tell me to take the wieners out, which I don't listen to. No, everyday people typically, sometimes they're a little shocked and don't know what to say. So luckily they don't ever try to give me advice anymore.
Good. A lot of the artwork that I'm seeing you use is vintage erotica, and that looks like a very definite choice. It's almost a signature. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, a lot of the collaged work that ends up in the paintings is sourced from vintage porn. It's a mixture of stuff I get from my landlords who used to work for a porn publishing business. A lot of it came from Circus of Books, which was the old
Oh, yes.
yeah, in West Hollywood. It's now gone, but I still get there's next door to that's kind of a lowbrow sex shop. I still get a lot of good stuff from them, which is really awesome. And then also, I've made a couple friends here in West Hollywood who are in their 80s, and they used to be pornographers back in the day, and they also provide me with a lot of that material. And it's intentional. At first, when I was younger and would use vintage porn, I don't think I had as much of a connection to it because my own personal life experience hadn't really caught up to it, I think, in many ways. But now that I'm like late 30s, I've been around the block a couple times. I feel a much stronger connection to these men, especially now that I'm becoming older than the men in the photos. and and I'm becoming one of the older homosexuals now. And the men I used to kind of think of as being older than me are now younger or my peers, and so I feel like they're not vintage anymore. They're just kind of fill-ins for friends and other lovers. And
Okay.
I also, in the photography portion of my practice, I use that opportunity to bring in friends, lovers, partners into that part. And so there's kind of a bridge between, the drawings, the paintings, and the photographs that kind of span a few decades in terms of where the men come from. But as I've gotten older, yeah, I think of them less like vintage and then more like contemporary with myself.
Interesting.
That is interesting. So you have, it's like a parallel of your life once removed or something. It's interesting.
Yeah.
And what is the current expiration date on when one becomes an older homosexual? What is that, 30? 32? I haven't figured out where that line is.
Well, as I get older, the line keeps getting further and further. So
I know that's right.
I hear you.
I used to think like your 30s was like old, and then now I'm in my 30s. I'm like, no, maybe it's like your 60s is older. And then we have some friends who, are more fit than I am, and they're in their 60s, and I'm think, well, good for them. Like, it's like you can keep pushing that bar for yourself further and further, and it's all relative.
Well, that was always me. I was always friends with people who were like 10 years older than myself. So I would look at them and I'm like, well, they're fabulous. So that's not old. So yeah, same thing. The marker keeps getting pushed further and further ahead. I'll be 90 going 103. That's, maybe that's old. I don't know.
Shit, then they'll have that like reverse aging serum, and we'll all be like young and like smooth skinned and
Right.
everything. So the future is near.
In looking at vintage, in a lot of the photography that happened in like the later 1970s, I think you touched on this as I was reading about your work. A lot of those folks never did get old. They didn't get the opportunity. So there is that forever young, but for, such an awful reason for 15 years, we went through that and we lost a generation. We don't have a lot of 65-year-olds right now.
Yeah, I think there is almost like a responsibility. I thought of, at least over time with using vintage porn, I've thought more and more about the responsibility I have to give a lot of these men kind of like an everlasting legacy or a place to be. For a lot of these men who pose for the photos, it's hard to imagine a world like today where they came out at 13 and their family graciously accepted them and they went on to have very prosperous lives. And so I feel that as I've worked with the material more, I feel more and more of an obligation to find them homes in the paintings. Like a painting is like a place for these men to live out their lives. It's like maybe these photos are the only the only examples of their lives that still existed today, because, some of those men, when they came out, their families rejected them. They ceased to exist for them. And even when they die, a lot of the porn magazines, it's wild. A lot of the porn magazines that come into Circus of Books and the sex shop next door are just, I was told that a lot of them are donated from families who, somebody died and then they found a box of porn and they just get rid of it. And so Circus of Books or the sex shop next door is lucky to have at least somebody who even cares to drop it off, and I often say that because I know when I get the porn from my landlords, it literally comes from the bottom of the closet and then it appears on my porch. And there's something about taking these men who had this closeted or like this thrown away life, bringing them out of the closet and then putting them in a painting, which then kind of takes on like the form of a memorial or a shrine. And, if I was one of these men, I would only hope that some faggot in the future finds me and then puts me in a beautiful painting, and hope to God that one day it ends up in a museum so everybody can watch me forever.
There you go.
And beautiful.
I think it is beautiful. I do.
And the title in my head right now is A Love Letter to Future Faggots.
Yeah.
Right.
Because, and maybe it's just the, being a millennial or something. I feel like there's something kind of cuspy about, growing up in the 90s and early 2000s where, for me, I grew up in a conservative household. And when Ellen DeGeneres kissed Laura Dern, I remember that Thanksgiving, my family all talking about like how gross that was and how we don't need to see that. And, we would, one time we were planning a trip to Disneyland. I remember my uncle and my aunt like talking about avoiding the gay days at Disneyland. And, now I just, that was 25, 30 years ago. And it was like 20, 25 years ago. And nowadays for me, I had a hard time because I was told queer people were demonized much of my childhood, that it really made gay people kind of scary for me. So coming out, I had a lot of that when I was especially late teens, early 20s. I had a lot of like, overly flamboyant gay men or older queer men were really intimidating to me and I had this whole like, oh, I'm not like them, they're different. And then now that I'm much older, I know I most definitely am just like them, and that everything I was ever told about them wasn't true. And right. That queer people can be some of the most weathered and compassionate people you could ever meet.
Oh my God, I love
weathered
that.
And
weathered
compassionate.
And compassionate. That's an apt description.
Yeah, I like that.
Because there are so many parallels, in the work that I do with trans folk today, where their experiences very much are like the queer experiences, of the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. Where there is no family acceptance, where there is a lot of internalized transphobia. There's a lot of, I'm not that. And I went through that myself, in coming out as trans. And it was meeting older trans folk, meeting, who were such a variety of people who were exactly weathered and compassionate and willing to share their stories and listen to mine. And, one of them famously looked at me one day and just shook her head and said, "Honey, you're just trans." And I went, "Oh, you're right." Mm-hmm. Okay, that was easy. But, I see those parallels today. So it's still happening. It's just happening to a different segment of our community. And one of the things that I have said to a lot of the younger people, and younger in trans years, because some of them are in their 50s, but is a lot of trans folk never do have queer community, where I had so many years of that. before finally coming out as trans. You know, I was out as queer, and we were out and about, and we knew all of these folks, and we had that solid community around us. And you know, for a lot of trans people, they just don't. You know, they're living sort of a heteronormative existence, and then they have to come to terms with their truth. And it's like, where do I go, and who do I talk to, and how do I even meet you folks? And it's like, come on, we got you.
Yeah. I also think, you know, when thinking about my own experience growing up in my house, there was one trans woman who worked at the local grocery store, and I remember, you know, she was also demonized too, in the same way that like all queer people in my family were. Um, and I think back, I often wonder where she is now. And you know, I think of her as being like one of the most brave examples of like of people to exist from my youth, where I didn't know her. She was a an othered person that
Oh,
worked
yeah.
at the grocery store. But it's been etched in my mind that, like, you know, she came to work every day, and I could only imagine what she experienced and like how horrible that like could have been. But like, wow, like what a strong individual. Like I'm still kind of blown away that somebody in the 90s could exist and live so openly and freely. And even as like a young gay boy, like her example can still like stick with me almost 40 years later.
Right. Right. How about that?
Yeah, the 90s for me was very much like that because that's, you know, that's when I came out and, you know, I was already in my rocker punker like mindset, and just being an out and proud queer person is punk rock right there. So it's like that everyone had that vibe to me. Everyone that walks with their the swish in their hips and their head held high, you know, it was like you're a rebel and I need to like know more about you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think the other day I was talking to this other artist, Jeffrey Mitchell, about the kind of synonyms we take on when we're younger that are synonyms for queer or gay or whatever. And punk is one of them. Artsy is another one.
I was definitely an artsy queen.
An
Yes.
art sequence, right? Dance and choreography, and yeah, you stayed on the path.
Mm.
I am fascinated by this. I saw that in paying for art school, I think you were 24. You worked for Darcel.
Oh yeah, that was a wonderful time in my life. It was I worked for her for about a year and a half. I was between undergrad and grad school, and I moved back to Portland where I grew up. And I had been working at the Portland Art Museum, but it didn't pay me enough to save any money to move to New York. So I picked up a job moonlighting at Darcel's as a cocktail waiter,
Hmm.
and it was so crazy. It was so much fun,
That sounds
and
right.
yeah, 3 nights a week, I would Thursday, Friday, Saturday. After I got off work at the museum, I would walk to Chinatown from the museum and put on some little short shorts and a t-shirt. And yeah, from what was it, like 8 or 9 to midnight, it was drag and burlesque. She had her 2 shows a night that she did, and then after midnight, it was male strippers. And it was one of the best fucking jobs I ever had. It was so much fun.
Oh, that's
Like
so awesome.
it paid, like, you know, she paid us not greatly, but the tips were awesome. You want to get good tips, go work at a strip club. Like people show up, like, you know, people show up, they come to have a good time, they bring tons of cash. uh you know, I did learn that there's a very thin line between you know, being a cocktail waiter and sex work at that point in my life. That was an interesting experience. But you know, if you want to touch my butt and put $10 on my tray, go for it.
Right. I
Like,
mean,
sure, it's like you're literally trading like your comfortability or access for money. And
Right.
shit, I have a price. So,
right. That's right.
but yeah,
Hey.
working for Giselle was amazing. She was awesome. She ran a tight shift,
Okay.
but she was really loving. And you know, every holiday she opened up. We pushed all the furniture aside in the club, and she opened it up for a Thanksgiving or Christmas banquet.
Oh,
And she would feed all the local homeless people in Chinatown. And the community that she built there is so, like, compared to, when you work somewhere and they say we're family,
yeah.
uh, Darcel's was really, really, really a family. And to this day, there's a couple people who work there who are just like some of my uh, dearest loved ones.
I love that.
That tracks with what I've heard, actually.
Yeah.
How I wonder how much of seeing that, being a part of that, informs your art. Because this is an iconic person. Darcel and that whole story is just iconic and nationally known, at least in queer communities. And you took a piece of that with you to New York for grad school.
Yeah, when I said earlier I was kind of scared of when I was younger, I was really intimidated by older gay men, especially. Darcel's was my first experience dipping into a world of like multi-generational queer people coming together to work and have fun. And I was maybe like 24 or something around the time, somewhere between 24 and 27, I don't remember. And I'd have to do the math. And it was great because all the queens who work there are different generational ages. The staff who works there is the clientele, the strippers, and it was a real awesome experience to have people from uh, 7 different decades together, putting on a show, serving people, having a good time. 4 nights a week, and uh, yeah, it broke down, I think, a lot of those mental barriers I had, or at least even, it's in Chinatown, so there's a lot of gay bars around there. Some of the more local people who I think I might have been like, oh, those are old barflies or something. I kind of learned who they were as people, and, had friendships with many of them after I started working at Darcel's, being their cocktail waiter. And it really kind of destigmatized a lot of the generational gaps I thought existed.
Yeah,
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that.
yeah, because it's so important. It's so important. Like you don't have to sleep with them. You don't have to sleep with everyone, but the friendships that are built are incredibly important. And hearing those stories and understanding, this didn't all begin when I got here. This was all happening. And these folks were a lot more resourceful than we need to be today, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about this the other day because I'm working on an op-ed for somebody. I was thinking a lot about the, queer friendships are often really pluralistic. And I think that's the one thing that like brings a lot of queer people together. The idea that, a hookup can then turn into a lifelong friendship.
Very much.
Or like me and these, there's one pornographer specifically who's in his 80s in West Hollywood, where we get together for dinner like every other month. And he tells me stories about, the models he used to pick up who were sex workers on Santa Monica, and how some of them became his boyfriends for 20 years. And, how they had, other relationships. And so I feel like queer people we're really good at having nuanced and complicated relationships that also kind of tie us together between the generations. Because, while again, that older pornographer told me, he's not out having sex anymore. He kind of makes lighthearted jokes about it. He has photo albums filled with pictures of his like lovers and his friends, and I think those stories connect us in many ways, and it can make, while they're not related, it does make us feel like family in a certain way. And again, that kind of outsiderness that we all kind of experience in our life, even as a out proud gay man, I still feel othered in spaces and where I go. And we kind of, we go with it, we're used to it, we roll with it. But sometimes when you meet another queer person who has a very similar experience from decades previous, it's like, oh, things really haven't changed. And that's why you and I are friends, because
Right.
this is what we have in common.
Right. We've been through it together.
Right.
Yeah.
And some things, as much as has changed, a lot has not.
Mm-hmm.
A lot has not. And like I said, I look at it from a couple different perspectives, and I can tell you what's coming at the trans community right now is very similar to what I saw happen in the 80s, because that's when I came of age. So I was right there, sort of just coming out and just going to bars and just figuring out who I was. And then we were in the shadow of, first GRID, uh, and eventually HIV, and just hearing it all, and that fear that it's like trying to figure out how this all works and how do we stay alive and still celebrate one another and be with one another.
Yeah.
It was a time. It was a time, and I see the cycle repeating itself. So yeah, I think you become a little numb to it. If not numb, it's kind of like I've really developed a skin of your opinion of me is none of my business.
Mm-hmm.
You
Oh
know?
yeah. I feel like probably the last decade of my, and maybe it was when I moved to New York and there's just so many people there that you stopped caring about like what other people think. But yeah, you do over a certain time develop a certain coat of armor to the noise around you, especially when you realize like, if they're not paying your bills, don't pay them no mind.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also going back to the idea of intergenerational queer relationships and friendships, it's so important anyway, but also it just feels like this current generation of young folks, oh God, listen to me. These kids today, get off my lawn. No, just don't seem to have any connection or minimal connection to queer history. It's like, what do you mean you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Paris is burning, for instance? It's like, what rock are you living under that you have Wi-Fi? I don't. You know what I mean?
And see, I always say it's important to know history and to learn it and to show respect for it. But on the other hand, I think we should all be giving ourselves a collective round of applause, because really inside of one generation, we've created these brats, and it's possible to be one. It's possible to be. You don't have to live so radically to survive. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, sometimes I think, oh, I'm envious of these young people who could come out and do whatever they want. But then also I feel like if I don't know, I always wonder what kind of person I would have become if, let's say, I came out and I had parents who were accepting at the age of like, 13 or something. It's what would I be doing? Well, I don't know. Would I be a bank broker or something? Like, would I be doing
Maybe.
something boring with my life? I don't know.
Well, I mean, acceptance or no, the fabulous is baked into the queer DNA, so I don't know if that's true.
Well,
No, that's true. Because what makes it's funny when you're young. At least when I was younger, it's like gay people were like Elton John, Liberace. They have there's something fabulous about them, and I think that comes from a young age. When you're, at least for me, when I was told gay is bad, you kind of develop this way of like looking and taking in the world and reflecting and then pivoting, and you're kind of constantly like self-adjusting and being aware of the world around you. And so me as just like an aesthetically sensitive person, part of part of that, you just can't go through life accepting everything for what it is. You have to be constantly curating your own life, whether it's mentally, physically, aesthetically, socially. You're, as a queer person operating the world, you're constantly, every person you come into contact with, especially when you're younger and you're conscientious, like self-conscientious of that, like you become a curator of your own life.
Mhm.
And and that includes like you end up finding out what you like and what you don't like. You discover like what being fabulous is, and things that make life richer, as opposed to like, I feel, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but I feel bad for straight people who kind of coast through life, not ever having to be self-aware or question
Exactly.
anything. Like, you just kind of accept everything for what it is. And I feel like as a queer person and as queer people, we can't do that.
Yeah, it's like I'm always aware of the irony, like you were talking about with the Ellen DeGeneres episode. Oh, we don't need to see that. Meanwhile, tune into the soaps that day, and all you see is heterosexual loving on display from noon to 4. You know what I mean? And no one has a problem with that.
I was going to say, it's funny. It just kind of clicked for me, the idea that, me hearing, oh, we don't need to see that, but I do.
Yeah.
And
Also
when
that.
I make a painting, like when I make a painting, there's somebody else out there. All of my museum experiences, it wasn't until I was in my 20s and at the Portland Art Museum that I saw 2 Tom of Finland drawings on display of 2 like dudes making out or grabbing each other's wieners or something, that I didn't even recognize it as art, but seeing it in an institution made me kind of like raise an eyebrow. But like in hindsight, I realized that was the first time I had ever seen like gay romance or like, gay sex depicted in a public space. And like that Ellen DeGeneres moment, for me, it kind of, again, I didn't know if it was art or not, but I just thought like, oh, it's so weird to see like something like myself here. Like, that's weird. And who needed it? I did.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Representation continues to be so important, and it's what seems to scare straight folk the most, and cis folk the most, is we're seeing too much representation. You're getting ideas that you belong here, if you see yourself represented too often. And we don't need to see that. Yeah, we do. Yes, we do. And you can look away for a change. We've been looking away our whole lives. Well, how about you?
That's what so it's funny when people, luckily the most vocal people don't bother me, like the wonderful thing about art is it can be really passive. And pretty much all culture could be like that if you really wanted to. It's funny what people get turned up about. But if you don't like it, just don't consume it. Just like with all the book bans at schools. First of all, your fucking lazy ass isn't going to read that fucking book, and neither is probably your lazy child.
That part, right?
When I was a kid, you had to fucking drag me to the library to get me to get a book, let alone by sheer chance I find the one book that you probably don't want me to read. If having this, I think about book bans, and I think the struggle to get kids to read, period, is already too much. Let alone like, oh, are they going to go find this one book? And then again, God forbid they get an idea that like, oh, maybe I'm queer, or maybe I'm trans, or maybe, and I feel like in art and literature, especially, people are scared of it because when you look or read something, nobody has access to your thoughts. And to me, that's what makes art and literature so powerful, is that it allows every individual to have an experience and to process it without the person next to you knowing what you're thinking about. Right. And to have that internal monologue of being felt seen is powerful.
So definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, that's the policing of thought. It's so ironic. It's talking about the book bans. It's like, obviously these people have never read 1984.
Yeah. Or they'd know they're recreating it.
Exactly.
They'd know.
These aren't meant to be how-to manuals, people.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think it's important. I think queer art is important. I think, destigmatizing bodies goes a long way. I don't know what it is they're so afraid of. But, I find it powerful. I find it empowering for a lot of folks to be able to, say, yeah. And that's the thing, one of the things about queer love that, many people will probably never understand is so many of the rules never did apply to us anyway. So why should we live by them? There's no
Amen.
benefit. There's no benefit. And yeah, how many hookups, well, the sex it was okay, but you're a fascinating human being and we can have a lifelong friendship from that and meet one another's new lovers and everybody can have cocktails. It's okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I don't know if there's, beyond maybe Plato's Retreat, I just don't know if there's a straight example of that.
Right.
Like, hey, we all just hang out. It's cool. I met John Waters. So I work very closely with a woman who was a John Waters actress, a trans woman. And she introduced me to John one time. And the conversation we wound up having was about all the new language, and about, what is all this? What is that? Because I said, I lamented, online dating where everybody has like a laundry list of what they do and don't want and what you should and shouldn't be. And, I've started more than one debate going, what is this top and bottom thing? Like, I don't like, what is that? That I am this and only this. I'm like, doesn't that depend on the day and the mood and the who you hooked up with? It used to.
I think, we often, I think, substitute real life experiences for our online ones where we curate these, we put ourselves in these boxes and curate things for ourselves and put titles on everything. And I think it's one of the sad parts of social media. And for anybody who, online dates, online hookups or whatever, it's when nothing can replace the chemistry you have with somebody. And sometimes it's not about being the same, but being complementary.
Right.
And, my husband and I always joke around that, everybody says, you guys are so different, blah, blah, blah. But we are different. We're very different. And that's what makes it really wonderful. It makes it work. And, when we let go of titles and, again, I used to think that maybe I would police myself thinking I was too queer in some way. And I've really let go of a lot of that. Yeah, I sound like a fag. I know it. Like, I could be a little swishy. I know it. That's fine. And it's mostly been since I've been in my 30s that I've really let go of a lot of like titles. And I love too that, instead of tops and bottoms, you also have sides now. If I could have been a side, if I could have been a side in like my late teens, early 20s, that language had existed, I'd been like, yeah, that's great. That's like a dip your toe in kind of thing. And I wish I would have had that option back in the day.
I used to jokingly say that back in the day, oh, I'm a side. And now I'm like, oh, that's an actual term.
That's an actual thing.
It doesn't mean what I meant when I said it, but that's okay.
Yeah, but we did talk about that, when we would meet one another in person, and that was the only way we did it. It was that, hey, there's a vibe here, and let's get together. Like, first of all, hey, you're not going to kill me. I'm safe with you. You're safe with me. And there's kind of a vibe. And then we would figure it out.
Yeah.
Like, just figure it out. Sometimes it was wonderful. Sometimes it was meh. But again, so different from, I have this list for myself and it feels like we're putting ourselves in the same boxes we've had to escape.
That part.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Also, sometimes when people create these lists, it makes other people like, it's like, oh, I'm either like inadequate or like not qualified for your job position whatever they're going for. So then I just like, this is, I don't know. There's a script involved. I don't want it.
Right.
No. And doesn't that take everything out of it? I don't know. It does for me.
Yeah.
It does for me.
Also, going back to, you said, too gay, too queer. There was an article about you said like you were tired of being labeled as too gay.
Oh, that was on Instagram. I showed it to you. Yeah.
And that's something that I had battled for the longest time. Everyone was saying I was too gay. And now I'm like, for what? Too gay for what?
Yeah.
Like,
what does that even mean?
What does that even mean?
Oh, I totally agree. Like, and again, I like and when I exist, it's when I think of too gay, I think of like, I don't know, like Liberace or something. Like I can go a lot further. Like I can go way further if I wanted to, you know? Like, and what's wrong with that? Like, you just become more fabulous.
I mean, like, what was that show? The Book of Queer.
Yeah, that was too gay.
Did you ever see?
That
It was on
too
Discovery
gay.
Plus. It was like basically like an educational miniseries about queer history.
It was kind of like Drunk History meets
Drag
RuPaul's
Race.
Drag Race or something. It was a little bit too camp for the subject matter.
Yeah.
For me. And I never say something's too queer. But I
Right.
was like, oh, did we have to do it that way? Like it really kind of went over the top in too many directions, I felt. And I was like,
It's like pick a gay stereotype. There it is.
there it is. Everyone was on display. And every character in history was kind of portrayed in that same way, you know, like biggest swish you can find. And that was like,
Like
who was the audience? Who is this for?
right.
Because it didn't feel like it was for queer people, you know?
Like I'm not sure how close we were trying to go for historical accuracy, but I'm pretty sure that Alexander the Great never said, "Oh, krr."
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say. But yeah, other than that one example, too gay for what?
Well, exactly. You know, and we had a barbecue when we first moved back to New Jersey. And, you know, we finally had a big yard and it was still, you know, 2021 and distancing and all. But we had a big barbecue here. And there were a couple folks here who had not met our friends. You know, they were straight. And came to me later and said, wow, we had such a good time. We didn't know what to expect. You know, and I'm telling my neighbor, the lesbian across the street, who was also there, and she said, what the fuck do they think we do at a barbecue? I said, I wish I knew. Like, what was the apprehension?
We put those meat patties together and we grease them up.
Right.
Fry them.
But
just like you do.
Exactly.
Just like you do. Right. Because there were kids here. There were, you know, the only thing that the same person noted was people were going up and down the outdoor staircase because we have a little apartment upstairs. And she didn't know why everyone was going upstairs. And I said, because there are kids here. And she said, well, what does that mean? And I said, they're getting high. They're just smoking weed up in Joan's apartment so that they're not doing it around the kids. That's all. That's all that's happening. I swear to you. They're going to see the old hippie. And she's like, oh,
what's
right.
up there? What are they doing?
Oh, yeah, like, why do they keep going upstairs? I said, because she has good weed. That's why. Yeah. So that was it was just funny. It was like, because we don't think about it anymore. You know, there were a lot of trans people here. There were a lot of non-binary people here. There were a ton of queer people here. And all of, you know, they're just all friends. And they're all from different age groups and backgrounds and a lot of artists and a lot of really awesome people. And it was like, why would you not be comfortable with us? Yeah, but that was said. It was like, well, everyone was so nice. Well, what did you think?
They didn't stick around for the child sacrifice.
Exactly. Count your children.
Well, not before sundown. What are we, heathens?
But yeah, so thank you for bringing more queer art and queer joy really into the world.
Yeah.
It's exciting. Tell us about the gallery and tell us about the solo installation. What are the deets?
Yeah, so the show is it's up till October 21st in Chinatown here in Los Angeles. It consists of 6 paintings, 10 drawings, and 10 double exposure Polaroids I made in the last year. It's all... Some of it's the biggest paintings. 2 of them are the biggest paintings I've ever made. They're about 5 by 7 feet.
Wow.
And they're from sculpted paper pulp. So they have a 3-dimensional surface. A lot of people don't realize that they're kind of 3-dimensional in a way. And yeah, it's just the most ambitious work. It's Ryan Noon, who runs the gallery, Noon Projects. He's kind of become this, maybe by default, the queer gallery. I don't know if he'd like that title, but I'd take it.
Right.
Um, there's quite a few queer artists who he represents and shows, and it's a really awesome. It's so fucking great. Like, if people don't know much about the art world, but it's very like, you think, oh, the art world, it's a bunch of, naked people, art school confidential style, running around doing like weird artsy things. But the art world is actually fairly conservative.
Mm.
Like, outside of classical kind of uh, typical beauty, paintings of naked women are still very popular. They always have been. Pictures of naked men are a little less popular. But it's really awesome to have a gallerist who believes in you, who accepts your work for what it is, doesn't ask you to change anything about it to make it more,
Right.
marketable. It's nice, and I'm glad that Ryan, came to my studio a couple years ago when he first moved to Los Angeles and did a studio visit. And it means a lot, to have a gallerist who, when they believe in you and it's not for like commercial reasons, um, you you just know that somebody connects to it more genuinely, because there's so many, not to spill some tea, but I'll do it anyway.
Oh, go ahead.
There's so many galleries, so many big name galleries have shitty rosters just to pad them to sell to people. There was some, identity politics is a thing in the art world, and galleries will shift with the wind,
Mm.
and they'll take people on, and if they don't have XYZ type person on their roster, they'll run out and find
Uh-huh.
one. And unfortunately, they don't always do a good job of finding the person. And so then they start peddling crappy artwork by crappy artists, and it doesn't help anybody in the art world, let alone they think that they're being, I don't know, social justice warriors or something by representing certain artists. But you're really doing a huge disservice to those communities by picking bad people to represent them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so if more galleries were more thoughtful and more genuine and more earnest about who they brought on, and actually thought deeply about those people and the people who make the work, you might have somebody more like Ryan Noon, who creates this community of artists that, even if the artist is somebody whose work I don't particularly care for myself, I know that there's this like soul and conviction at the core of it that I can get behind. It's a good for you, not for me situation
Right.
sometimes, but at least I can get behind it, and I am all about that. Like, I don't have to be everybody's cup of tea, but at the end of the day, like, knowing that somebody believes in me, regardless, is really powerful.
Right.
Absolutely.
It
The
means a lot.
authenticity is important, even if it's not just coming from the artist, but from the people that are supposed to be the advocates for the art. So exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had, because we had the bar the way that we had it, we created a new installation each month by a queer artist who was willing to hang some work and come hang out with us for a night. And then, we took nothing if their art sold. I mean, that was, between the consumer and the artist. And we just enjoyed having their work in the space. And we've also built a substantial art collection, because usually they left us with a piece. So we've got some amazing pieces through our house now. So even though the bar's gone, I remember each of the artists and the unique perspective that they brought. And I think we need more of that. We need more accessible art, accessible public spaces where people can experience art, and, emerging artists can really cut their teeth.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish people had more. I think people love pictures, but I wish people loved art, like the transcendental experience of enjoying a work of art. And I hope and pray that in the future, that people, as you mature and your taste develops, that you kind of be able to distinguish the two, like the difference between, like a Banksy print and like a real fine painting or something, something that you live with and it changes through the day. And that's a good piece of art. I hope that a lot of the art that you live with changes through the season, or that like you'll pass by it randomly one day after it's been hanging on your wall for 5 years and you notice something different and you feel differently. Like I live with a lot of work in my house, and I'm a big supporter and advocate of other artists and their work. And I think of these things almost like pearls. Like we're all clams, and these are like the pearls of our existence, and that they can leave we can leave beautiful objects behind that like move and change people and make people see the world in different ways. And it can be, and you don't have to go to school for it. You don't have to be a trained artist. I collect a lot of outsider art is what they kind of refer to it as, which is people who just don't have formal training. And that's where like so much of the best work comes from, because it comes from within. It comes from a lived experience and a life dedicated to a practice of just making. And I wish more people did that. Like anybody can make art. Anybody can be an artist. And if you spend enough time, can find that well within you that creates these pearls of your existence. And like I pray for everybody that they have that, and I want everybody to do it. If you don't make art, you should make it. And anybody listening who doesn't make art, you should.
I agree.
Hear.
I agree, because that's what they train out of us, and they should train us to keep it within us, because it's so important.
Yeah.
That was one of the big. I mean, my children are adults, but that was one of the most important things to me is find the art within you. So my son is a musician and an amazing guitar player and songwriter, and that helps him process things. When he doesn't know what to say or he's angry, he picks up that guitar. So it's kind of an extension.
Yeah.
And I just think it's important to everyone, we know how many dancers who they dance, it helps to process life.
Well, it's when neocons go on about faith and God and stuff like that, it's a certain kind of, I understand when maybe a synonym for it is a form of spirituality, or earlier I said transcendental, whatever. Art is that thing that gets you closer to, air quotes, God. This idea that you can be in the moment, have an experience, feel things, and not be. Art is the only area in my own life, and I think a lot of other artists, musicians, performers would also recognize this. It's the one area your creativity is like, and when you're in the moment, it's the one area of your life that you don't feel exploited. Like you're not exploited. Like nobody's asking you of anything. You're not making anything for anybody. And it's like, you could almost, at least for me, I get into like a meditative state almost when I'm painting. I put on some music and I just go to town, and it's the best I fucking feel. And that is like that spiritual thing. I think that a lot of people reference as being, again, air quotes, God, that it's like a natural form of therapy for ourselves. It gives us something to turn to every day that's not an object or money or another person or validation. It's something that we can turn to on a daily basis for self-affirmation and to believe in ourselves, and to put, again, like you're putting beauty into the world by writing a song, singing a song, performing, drawing, painting. I think that art, all forms of art, are a form of this kind of transcendental thing that we actually all are missing in our lives.
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah. Definitely.
Couldn't have said that better.
Oh, sorry if we're like at church now.
No.
It's one of the things that I think is so important that we've gotten away from as a nation. It really is the connections to one another, and being able to see our common humanity kind of through the cacophony of things. And I don't think there's anything more powerful personally than art that is created by someone who knows what it is to be othered. Who knows what it is to be marginalized and to be lessened by other humans. It's so powerful. and so beautiful. So I loved seeing your work. I want to see it in person one of these days. But if you
Yes.
are a listener in the LA area, you still have time to go and experience the magic that is Christian Rogers.
And once again, we're going to put all of the information about the showing in the notes to this episode.
Yes, we will. Any final thoughts, sir?
No, I enjoyed my time with you guys. I kind of raced here from the gym and the donut shop in order to.
I love that.
to
I
get
love
here.
that.
Yeah, I'm ready to like venture out into my Saturday tonight. Or today is this weekend's the Tom of Finland erotic art
Oh,
fair.
that's
Right.
right. I did see something about that.
And I am ready just to go take in all the art, the good, the bad, the ugly, the wonderful, the kinky. I want to see it all. I'm really excited for the weekend.
Awesome.
Do that.
Awesome. Yeah, we have a busy weekend to get to ourselves. We have dance and stuff and things and
Whatnot.
whatnot. Yeah.
Cool. Don't forget the child sacrifice.
So we will be out and about as well, but it won't be Tom of Finland, sadly. But
Not
do
on
enjoy
purpose,
that.
anyway.
Well, yeah. You never know. You never know. We've really enjoyed this time, Christian. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. My face hurts actually from smiling so much.
Oh, I love
Like,
that.
There you go. You got another workout.
I gotta go see the Botox guy now.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
Well, thank you very much. And hopefully we will keep in touch with you and your work.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time and caring about my work.
Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries. All names, pictures, music, audio, and video clips are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective copyright holders.